Grace, peace, and welcome to Podcast of the Wills, a podcast that treats Star Wars like a sacred text. I am your host, Nick Milkey, and I am here on a Sunday night, ready to talk with an amazing guest in the presence of our lovely Patreon patron supporters. Patrons, I think that's what I call you. I'm still not used to that yet, but I'm working on it. We're getting there. It has been a long week. It has been a long weekend, mostly fulfilling, good time with the family. But there are a few things. I mean, I love my family, and that's always going to be number one. But there are a few things more enjoyable at the end of my week before I start another week than the chance to sit down, have a fun Star Wars conversation with somebody that I think is really interesting. And tonight is no exception. And to do what apparently has become one of my calling cards, which is have a drink. So I have poured a glass of whiskey. I'm raising my glass to all of my friends, both present tonight, out in the world doing their thing. I see Framey, I see Matthew, I see Jeff, I saw Michael somewhere. Cheers to all of you. Happy Sunday. Happy Return of the Jedi Canon Studies, Chapter 6. And I hope everybody's doing well. I hope you are taking care of yourself. I hope you're with your people and feeling loved. At my house with our girls, we talk about, are you feeling happy, healthy, safe, and secure? Those are the questions that we ask when, especially with two teenagers. I spend a decent amount of time checking on people and going, are you good? Are you feeling happy, healthy, safe, and secure? Those are our markers. That's where we are. So I hope you are all feeling happy, healthy, safe, and secure. I'm excited to get into the show tonight. Before we do, just a couple of really quick things. TeePublic exists. You know that I talk about it every week. We have Podcast of the Wills t-shirts. They are not on sale right now. And not that I want to discourage anyone from going to buy a t-shirt. But I think they'll be on sale next week. I will tweet that out if they are. But if you want to, you can find it on Twitter. You can find it in the show notes. We can, shirts, t-shirts, the Dad Batch t-shirt that we made during Bad Batch when that was on. There's a couple of other designs. I will say, shout out to my good friend Michael. There is a t-shirt currently on our TeePublic store that is a McDonald's McRib sandwich wearing a Santa hat. That was a design that he specifically requested. I made it and he bought it, but also someone else in this weird world bought one as well. And I don't know who it is. So I would love for y'all to check that stuff out. Also, if I'm plugging some things, if you've been keeping up lately, and as patrons, you certainly know, I joined up with Pete about a month and a half ago, and we have combined our streams under the ATG Cast umbrella. So every other week, you're either getting Podcast of the Wills or you're getting Around the Galaxy. Pete's still doing Disturbances in the Force. And then on Friday nights, we have been doing streaming Star Wars, talking about Book of Boba Fett the last 6 weeks. This past week, we had Becca Benjamin on. Becca is so wonderful from Tarkin's Talk Shelf. And I don't know that I've encountered anybody in this Star Wars podcasting space that knows Star Wars lore as well as she does. And I love the perspective she brings and her ability to draw connections. And when we talked Friday night, if you tuned in, you saw it. If not, little teaser, because the audio version comes out tomorrow. She talked about the scenes with Luke in the bamboo forest with Grogu when he was balancing and Luke was doing his lightsaber forms and doing that whole thing. And she connects that back to Rebels when Ezra's watching the holocron and it's Obi-Wan doing those same forms. And it's just those moments where I'm just like, it all connects. It's so great. So streaming Star Wars, the season finale of Book of Boba Fett is this week, and if you haven't kept up. So we are excited to do streaming Star Wars this coming Friday night. I think it'll be at 8 o'clock, and we're working on a special guest. We definitely will probably have a guest of some sort. But we're efforting a couple of other fun guests, hopefully, to make it a good wrap-up to this series, and then we'll wait and see what's going to come next in our next Disney Plus streaming Star Wars effort. So all of those things, most of it you probably knew about, but I feel like I'm not out of this plugging mode yet. So I feel like I'm still required to do that. So there are the plugs. Let's get into the good stuff. Tonight, my guest has become one of my favorite people to hear their voice, to listen to what they have to say. I found them through Pink Milk, and especially as I have become, as much as I can be, a regular attendee in the Steam Room on Friday evenings for just some of the best Star Wars conversations where people are relaxed, they're themselves. And so I am excited tonight to have M from Pink Milk join me because she is a dedicated Return of the Jedi person. And we're going to get her in here now, and we're going to hear about M and all of her connections. So, M, welcome to Podcast to the Wills.
Hi, everybody. It's so nice to be here. What an enormous pleasure and an honor. I'm doing very well, thank you. I just came in from running errands with my son. It was very cold outside. I'm happy to be where it's warm.
I understand. As someone who lives in Alabama, our weather is very finicky, and that's putting it very mildly. So, it could be 70 by Tuesday, but it's been like 45 the last couple of days, which is unusual for us. So we're always kind of ping-ponging around, bouncing back and forth.
I'm in Montreal, so we're just like buried in snow from November until March. So
I am a cold weather person, but I can tell you the 5 other people that live in my house with me would absolutely be miserable. So my wife sleeps under 3 blankets. She sleeps fully clothed, like socks, pants, shirts, things. And I'm just like, I don't understand. Like this, I would burst into flames. But anyhow, we're not here to talk about the weather. We're here to talk about Return of the Jedi. But before we do that, because I'm sure we've got some Podcast of the Wills listeners who may not know who you are, give us kind of a basic introduction to M and maybe connect that up to what you do with Brian and Mark and Chase and Pink Milk.
Sure. So hi everybody. My name is M. It's so nice to meet all of you. So I am a queer Star Wars content creator, and I'm involved with the Pink Milk After Dark crew. I joined the show in November of 2020. I believe. Yeah. When we started doing roundtable discussions of the first season of The Mandalorian, Brian, he's the captain of our ship, and he wanted to assemble, queer people and gender nonconforming people to talk about the themes of the show because he thought it was an important conversation. There were 9 of us, and by the end, a handful of us were on board to do a regular Friday night live stream. So you can catch us on YouTube every Friday night at 9:30 Eastern time. And the YouTube channel is called Pink Milk Podcast. So what else do you want to know?
Well, tell us a little bit about M in general, who you are. I know you've got a family, and maybe even kind of connect that with some of your Star Wars, where Star Wars started for you.
Sure. So, all right. Well, I mean, I've been a Star Wars fan since I was 5 years old. And my mom really encouraged me to be a Star Wars fan because she was a very outspoken feminist, and she loved that there was such a strong female character in the franchise. She thought it was a great role model, and I don't disagree. So I've been a huge fan of Princess Leia ever since I was little. One of my first Halloween costumes was actually, she sewed me the white satin gown. And then my dad made me a blaster out of wood to carry around. And so someone opened their door and thought I was an angel. And I showed them my blaster and they said, "Oh, an angel with a gun."
That's outstanding.
So I am, my day job is I am an administrator at a pharmaceutical company.
Okay.
We specialize in customized medications. So helping pharmacists and physicians to make custom medicine for people who need it. So people who have allergies or people who are disabled or frail and can't and have trouble doing things like swallowing pills, finding alternative routes of administration for their medications to enhance compliance and, quality of life for people who need medication in order to maintain their health. I am married to a beautiful woman from Australia. Her name is Sarah. We met on the internet. We met because we were both Madonna fans. We met in an internet community.
Which only comes up on Pink Milk After Dark at least 2 times every week. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, not that much.
We're just waiting. We're just waiting for Madonna herself to be a guest on the After Dark stream.
I don't know if she knows what a Star Wars is.
But at this point, that's not even important.
It's true. And of course, our Pink Milk ethos is we want you if you've been a Star Wars fan for 40 years or 40 minutes. So it's true. We would be very welcoming of that. Exactly. And I have a 5-year. Well, oh my gosh, he's 6 now. He just turned 6 like last week. I have a 6-year-old son. His name is Silas. And
Excellent.
he's autistic and he's wonderful. And I love him
Very,
much.
very wonderful. I have a 5-year-old who will be 6 next month, so I'm right there with you. One of them, anyhow. The other ones, as I like to say quite regularly, I live in a house with 6 women, so I am nothing if outnumbered, and I literally wouldn't trade it for the world.
Yeah, you sound like a lucky man.
Lucky just doesn't scratch the surface. I've got 4 daughters, a wife, and my dog, and every one of those women, they put up with me, and I'll take it every day of the week.
That's beautiful.
So, well, let's do this. We're talking about Return of the Jedi, and Brian has been on with me before. Mark has been on with me before. I haven't had a chance to get Chase on yet, but it's coming. So when I was starting into the Return of the Jedi Canon Studies series, I reached out to Brian and I said, who in the Pink Milk crew are Return of the Jedi people? Well, of course, you know what he said. Every one of us. Like,
yes.
Everybody is hardcore Return of the Jedi. I was like, well, I don't have enough room for everybody for this one. But he was like, but if you're going to pick, he was like, you need to get him on. And I was like, well, I kind of wanted him on anyhow. So it was, meant to be. It was willed through the Force. So tell me about, what were your first experiences with Return of the Jedi? What was it that maybe stood out for you overall with the movie? Before we get into our actual minutes for the study, kind of give us the background on you and Return of the Jedi.
So Return of the Jedi was the first Star Wars movie I ever saw. I was like 5 or 6 years old, and my babysitter had a VHS copy of Return of the Jedi. And she would put it on, and I would watch it until my mom came to pick me up. So I saw like the first 25 to 30 minutes of Return of the Jedi, like, 20 or 30 times.
Exactly.
And yeah, that was my first Star Wars. And like I said, as soon as my mom found out that I liked that movie, she started showing me the other properties. I had a comic. I had that picture, that visual storybook with all of the photos in it. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it was like, I always loved it. I always found the story so comforting.
Absolutely.
Because I associated it with like childhood and just being carefree. And
mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, and how has that for you? And I've heard you talk about this some on After Dark, and just, some of these storylines tend to weave themselves into, not only who we become as adults, because, a lot of these stories are the mythologies and the mythos and the lore that carry into who we are as adults and who we are, that formulate, whether it's some of our sense of ethics, our sense of adventure, like it affects us in a lot of different ways. As a grown-up Star Wars fan, as a content creator, and I will also throw in, because you didn't point this out as a part of your introduction, you are also a fanfic writer.
I sure am.
A very prolific fic writer at that, which is fantastic. I have my 2 teenage daughters who will be 14 in May, literally come home from school every day and write fanfic, and they're in Marvel mode right now. Thor and Loki, like those are their 2 things. But it's a thing. In fact, I need to have some conversations with you offline about maybe giving them some pointers and whatever. But Star Wars, and especially Return of the Jedi, like it had a lasting impact on you. Talk about kind of the carryover. I mean, it's one thing to get it as a kid, because like Jeff said in the chat, it was the first one that I saw in the theater. I had seen the others, I think I had, but I was just the right age. Talk about kind of the long-term carryover for you with Jedi.
Even when I wasn't that into Star Wars, because I kind of fell out of it for a little bit, and then the sequel trilogy like reeled me back in. But even when I wasn't like, a Star Wars nerd, whatever, mm-hmm. during that short window in my life, Return of the Jedi was one of my comfort movies.
Sure.
And it has everything. It has really everything you could possibly want. It has like adventure and compelling intrigue, and it has romance, and it has humor. It was just so appealing to me. It just felt like a whole meal, when I would watch it. And also just because I'm me, and I've always been very rebellious. And I liked the overall theme of resisting oppression and breaking oppression. Like that was a huge thing for this little bleeding heart. tiny Emma, you know? And it made such an impact on me that I have a Hutt Slayer tattoo.
I love that. I saw the edge of it where it said Slayer, and I knew what your Twitter handle was, and so I was like, she's got the tattoo. That's
Yes.
fantastic. I love
It's
that
very
so much.
important to me. I love this piece of art. But yes, it's very important to me to like, and I love always having Carrie with me. Yeah, it's really, really meaningful. And I always thought it was so clever. Like, I always loved that sort of lesson of like, you know, if somebody tries to put a chain on you, just use it to strangle them. You know, it's like if somebody tries to oppress you or get one over on you, like, they don't know what they're in for. They don't know what kind of fight they're in for.
Yeah.
You know?
I love
and I
that
always
so much.
identified with that. So that was like my whole life. That's been meaningful to me.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And I think that, you know, like, I love what you said. There's so much in this one movie. You know, going back through it, I was born in 78. I say this every week. I was born in 78. So like, this is the first one that I was 5 years old when it came out in 83. Like, it was the right time to see it as, you know, as a movie in a theater. We saw it in a drive-in in Central Illinois in the back of my parents' station wagon. But I'm also of that generation. Like, Empire is my favorite Star Wars movie, but it's also my favorite movie of all time. But coming back to Jedi for this study over the last 6 weeks has really reminded me how much there is in this movie, how many different, you know, and to do it through the canon study lens is also another way that has really been fun for me. And also, and this is just purely coincidence, or the Force, I guess we should say, the will of the Force, that I've spent the last 6 weeks going through this movie, running in parallel to the Book of Boba Fett and getting all of this imagery of Boba 5 years after, and Tatooine, and like, even this episode that you and I are recording now comes on the heels of chapter 6 of Book of Boba Fett, and half the episode was Luke Skywalker in black clothing and the boot. Well, he didn't have the boots; he had the ninja booties. But like,
yes,
but we're that era
all
of
that
Luke
running
Skywalker.
and jumping he had to do.
Correct, but we're in that same era, so it's really fun to me to dig more into this movie. And like, I said it with Chris Ryans a couple weeks ago. Chris is like you are. He's like, this is my movie. This was the movie when I was a kid that I was most into and most stood out to me for a variety of reasons. So I love hearing that. And I love, again, you encapsulate it so well when you just go, there's just so much. Like, it seems oversimplified, but it's not.
No, there's so much there.
Yeah, there is so much there. Well, so talking about that, we're going to transition now into our canon study, which is kind of our textual study of this. And I'm so excited that I get you not only for the last chapter of this, but to have you on to do this in general, because you're a writer. And I love the way writers look at things. And I'm an aspiring writer. I'm not good at it at all, but I like to do it.
Me neither.
But the lens, the way writers look at things, and I'm such a sucker for story and arc and progression and all these different things. So I can't wait to dig into that. So for anybody that's listening to this audio version of the episode, we are starting at like an hour and 45 minutes, basically an hour and 45 minutes into the movie through the end of the movie. And so we're coming in. You know, the rebel crew is on Endor attempting to get the shield down. Luke has been captured. He's with the Emperor and Vader. They're into it's the crux of the movie. It's the whole wrap up and the whole thing. So we're going to jump in, and I'm just going to put the first question out there for you, Em, and we're going to just start with there. So the first question that we ask when we do our canon study is, what is the text telling us? And I always say this is our literal interpretation. What are you literally getting out of these minutes of our sacred text?
So, like, what is the literal story?
Yeah, literally, right. What are the things that are coming to you?
Well, I mean, the first thing that happens, like, around that timestamp is the Emperor telling Luke to kill him so that he can ascend. Right?
That's right. Where have we seen that before, or recently?
Yeah. Oh, okay. So. Yeah. Okay. I know. I have like so many thoughts, but I don't want to let them trickle out before we get to that part.
That's all right. Go ahead.
Oh, you want me to go ahead? Well, I mean, I think it's a really interesting. I think it's a really interesting way of conveying the villainy of the emperor, because that is like it's a perversion of the crucifixion, right?
Sure.
It's
Absolutely.
instead of sacrificing himself so that character or humanity can ascend into divinity, he is proposing that he sacrifice himself so that Luke descended to the dark side.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah. Flipping it.
Yeah, that's right.
The very George Lucas thing to do.
And it's great because like it hits you right in the gut, right? Like I remember as a child hearing that, because like you don't often, that's not a trick that's often used by villains in stories, of like being willing to sacrifice themselves. But then of course a little bit further on, he switches and he wants to sacrifice Darth Vader instead.
Right. Yeah.
So it just goes to show you like just how manipulative and slippery he is. It's like he's got like contingency plan on top of contingency plan on top of contingency plan, because if Luke isn't going to kill him and become Darth Vader's apprentice or replace him and have Darth Vader as his right hand, he wants him to kill Darth Vader so he can take Darth Vader.
That's right. Well, and I have to think in that. And I said this, maybe it was in last week's episode, when we were in chapter 5. There's a moment when Luke goes to Endor, he surrenders himself, and they're walking down that hallway before they get on the elevator, and it's just him and Vader.
Yeah.
That's when the turn starts for Darth Vader.
You think so?
I do. I think that in that moment, because of the recognition, like, he calls him father, I think, in part of that conversation, there's a hesitation when the camera pauses on Vader, when Luke has turned the saber up and Luke's ultra confident and he's like, I'm here. Yes, father, whatever. Like, there's a hesitation that they show in the cinematography, the way they shoot that shot, that I think, and this comes back to your point about Palpatine, contingency upon contingency, like that's his deal. And that, if we jump forward to something that, we can talk about if you want to, but like, with Rise of Skywalker, like I was more than fine that Palpatine was ultimately the big bad, because he's been the big bad since episode 1. And that's exactly what we know about him. Obsessed with living forever, obsessed with, having all the plans. Even if you go into the video games and, the Sentinel, whatever they are in Battlefront 2 and all that stuff, like it's perfectly in line with who he is. So I think in these moments, when he's telling Luke, strike me down, he knows already, like he's sorted it out. And I think he's sensed Vader's reticence and weakness to where he is. And so he knows he's safe saying that, like, and he's trying to play it. He's pushing Luke to see, is this really my next Padawan or apprentice, or is this next, like, it was very intentional, but you're right. It's such a great juxtaposition to the classic story, the classic sacrifice story.
Yeah. And then of course Darth Vader lights his saber to cross and to protect. The thing is, it looks like he's protecting Palpatine, but he's just protecting Luke from falling, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
At that point, I think he's made that turn. And we have that moment because Luke gives in. Luke, in a moment of, whether it's panic, whether it's fear, which we'll come to that in a minute, because as we get farther along and he and, Vader start to battle, the fear takes over even more.
Well, and I feel like his motivations shift during the battle, because he goes on this sort of emotional journey. Right?
That's right. Well, and the switch flips with, and I say it all the time, and because I have 4 daughters and the word sister is ever present in my house, I spend a lot of time going, sister, the way that, that classic, whatever. But that's when the switch flips. When Vader mentions Leia, that's when it happens. And he comes out from under those stairs and that balcony. And that's when, that's what that
provokes
turn.
Him into,
Correct.
Yes, that's right.
The drive. So one of the notes I had, and I want to hear the rest of yours for the literal interpretation, but I felt like in these minutes, it was a strong mix of hope followed up by despair. You have the rebels thinking that they're good with the shield generator, and then all of a sudden they're surrounded. It's a lot of ups and downs. We've had it through the whole movie, but in this tight, 20 or 25 minutes, we get all of it. We get confident Luke showing up thinking he's ready to face down the Emperor, and then it gets dashed. Then he gets bold and goes on the offensive. Then that was probably the biggest literal thing that I took out of all of it was how up and down we are from an emotional standpoint through these minutes.
And you know who hi, that'd be fun. And but you know who, and I think that this is what has led to him being such like a beloved character. But the way that Lando is the one steady thread through the whole thing, like he knows, he has faith,
and he pushes. When Akbar is trying to get them out of there, he says we have to give them more time. And I talked about that last week, even though that wasn't a part of last week's minutes. He's so dedicated to, and I feel like it's mirrored in Rogue One with them trying to get the shield generator down so that they can get into Scarif and help and all that kind of stuff. There's we've got to give, or no, I'm sorry, I stand corrected. It's Poe in Force Awakens when they're trying to get through to blow up the Starkiller base thing. Get to Starkiller? Yes, there's a part where Poe says we've got to give them more time, and there's it kind of has a similar turn. Okay. That's what I'm thinking of. But either way, you're exactly right. Lando came from a broken place. Lando came from a place of betrayal and probably trying to prove himself. Yeah. And in that moment, he's like, my friends are down there. Yeah. And he's sitting there with, 9 Numbers, his co-pilot, going, we have to give them more time. Because Akbar is like, it's a trap. We got to get out of here. That's where that comes from. Yep. But Lando is there for these people. And I have to believe it's because those people gave him a second chance. He betrayed them. And then, because it was still shaky at the end of Empire, even though he's going out to find Han.
I mean, this is his redemption, right?
Yeah, it's his
redemption. And that's why he's all in.
Yes. And I love that you see that in these moments, because I think it plays into, it certainly plays into the source of the victory. I mean, they still have to get into that superstructure and, blow it up and that kind of stuff. Yeah. What do you have any other literal moments, literal interpretations that you got out of this?
Yeah, well, I was talking about the I wrote some notes about the karmic retribution of Chewie commandeering the walker.
Yes.
And it reminded me of the line in scripture, like, whosoever slays with the sword, he shall be slain.
Yes, absolutely.
You never know I'm Jewish, right? Oh my gosh,
hey,
quoting Revelations. What
totally the there. You got it. That's right. That's not in yours, but we'll take it anyhow. I love that. Well, you'll like this, and I have to throw it out there because it's staring at me from my notepad that I keep on my desk. My guest last week, he uttered the phrase, Ewoks are the Pentecostals of Star Wars. And I can't stop thinking about that phrase. And I wrote it actually not on the notepad, but on like the bar across the top of the notepad because I just liked it so much. So yeah, it's a whole thing. Religion and Star Wars, it's there. But that's a great moment with, and I also did write down one of my first notes was that is where we get Chewie with the Tarzan yell.
Oh yes, that was such a great moment. Yeah, and and Leia's marksmanship after she's just been shot. I'm like, how badass is that?
She's everything, and
she literally just got shot.
Mm-hmm. and she looks at him as he's standing in front of her, and he's like, I got it. Like, she gives him that nod, and she is the badass that we've always attributed her to be. And truly. And of course we all love the symmetry of the I love you, I know, being reversed. Of course, that's such a great moment. Even as a kid, I knew, like, whenever I saw this at 5 or 6 or whatever, it was just that good. Like, I knew that was a good one. But yeah, like those moments, and again, the Han and Leia thing, like there's its own entire play that plays out in these last moments there between the stuff on, trying to get into the shield generator, all the way to the end when Han has the moment of realization after she kisses him, and like just watching, I rewatched it tonight right before we came on, and just the dumbfounded look on his face is
my gosh,
it's so special.
Everything.
Yes. Do you have anything else for your literal moments?
I was gonna talk about I was gonna talk about how it's Luke's love for Leia that provokes him
Yes.
into and the interesting thing is that the Emperor keeps lying because his line is your hate has made you powerful.
Right.
But it wasn't hate that provoked him into that
Nope.
battle. It was love.
Mm-hmm.
He the Emperor just keeps getting it wrong.
Well, and dare we say, and again, even reflected in this week's episode of Book of Boba Fett, that thing with Jedi, which is attachment.
Mhm.
There's an attachment with Leia. I wrote down the word desperation when it relates to that was the word. If I were to, if we're playing word association, and I think about the image of Luke coming out of the dark when Vader mentioned Seaster and that sword and its two-handed grip, and like he's really in it. Like that was desperation. Like he's desperate to protect Leia.
I will never forget the look on his face when he's dealing those blows, the final blows to like drive Vader to the ground before he cuts off his hand.
Yep.
And of course, the hand chopping is another echo. That's another bit of karmic retribution, right?
Yeah. I mean, Star Wars is nothing if not poetic, and everybody's favorite George Lucas cliche is that it rhymes. But desperation was the word I put in there. I will say the other thing that I wrote down, and this was my last note in the literal part, but if you have more, I want to hear them. After he has Vader on the ground, he's chopped his hand off, and he's kind of in that pseudo triumphant moment. The Emperor comes down, and the Emperor's doing his little, hand clap and good, that whole thing.
Yep.
I noticed tonight for the first time, I think maybe more than I ever have, the way Luke positions himself between Emperor and Vader. It's a very specific, his feet are spread. He's in a braced, he doesn't have his saber up. It's not that defensive a position, but it's the kind of intentional position that I would take between any of my family and something that's dangerous. Like it really, to me, felt like a choice the way he positioned his body between the Emperor and Darth Vader.
Yeah. Yeah, that was blocked out on purpose for sure.
Yeah. And I think that is, the interesting thing about it, because what we know about the Force and we know about sensing, and we get it in Empire when they're flying away from Bespin and they're still sensing each other. And I shouldn't have come. I'm endangering the mission and all these things. Even if the full turn for Vader hasn't happened yet, he hasn't thrown Palpatine down that shaft. Luke, there's a connection. There's a father-son Force connection that I think is overpowering that.
That's actually Brian's theory on when Vader starts turning. Brian thinks that he starts turning at the end of ESB.
Right. Yeah. I think that's certainly plausible. And every time I watch, Return of the Jedi, I feel like it just keeps moving closer to the beginning of the movie or to when Vader shows up.
Yeah.
Because even in the opening scenes of Jedi, when we see Vader on Death Star 2, when the Emperor's coming, like Vader is shrinking, and he's shrinking back into Anakin, and the recognition of there's something that I'm more interested in than working for Palpatine. And, he has been emotionally compromised by the realization that his son is here, is alive, and also on some level knowing that the daughter is around as well. Like I fully support Brian in that. So that's our first question. Our first question is, what is the text telling us? The second question that we usually go with in our canon study is, what is the text asking of us? And the way I always couch this is, what are the inspirational things that you personally are pulling from this text? Where are you being guided in an inspirational route?
Well, I mean, I already talked about the breaking of oppression. Like it's so satisfying to see the Ewoks triumphing over the Imperial force that's invading, and to see this sort of like low tech, these primitive weapons being so effective by exploiting the vulnerabilities of the higher tech warfare. Like, and I mean, obviously, like parallels to Vietnam, whatnot, etc. We all know.
Yes. Yes. Very, very publicly intentional parallels to Vietnam.
Yes. But also, I mean, just I feel like so many of the characters, like of the scenes at the end of this movie and the sort of the cathartic moments, the climaxes, I feel so strongly identified with the characters. Like I feel like when Luke is standing there in that throne room, you know, I feel like I'm sharing his emotions. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Absolutely.
Like I can completely, like, it's like the film really invites you to put yourself in his shoes.
Yes.
You know, and I feel like everything is just so perfectly crafted that you can understand his motivations and you can sort of go on the same emotional journey as him of like, these are momentous choices that we have to make about like, what do we value and what kind of person are we going to be?
Yeah.
You know, and like where are we going to like put our energy and what are we going to sacrifice ourselves for?
Correct. And that's, you know, priorities minimizes it too much, but like, where is your soul connected to? Where are you pulled to? And that's, of course, such a very, you know, the ethereal, pseudo magical version of the Force that is that connection, is that, you know, the connection that somebody has with a soulmate, the connection that somebody has with a child, you know, and that's, of course, what we're getting with this because it's father and son.
Yeah.
You know, I talk about my girls on this podcast all the time. Like the connection I have to my 4 daughters, they're, you know, I'll throw an emperor down a shaft every day of the week. Like there is, but it's bigger than that. And even as we go through the daily struggles of 2 being teenagers because they're twins, or the 9-year-old who's stuck in the middle of the 5-year-old and the almost 14-year-olds, like there's a balance that's struck there as you go through those emotional journeys and as you go through what those connections are. And, you know, we're working through a thing right now with my 2 teenage daughters. There's a mother-daughter element that becomes a whole other separate thing. And teenage girls and their moms, like that's a whole separate thing.
I remember.
And yeah, and so that's where we are. But at the core of that is the soul and the spirit of it all, which is, of course, they love each other, but they're also figuring each other out on a different level than they did when they were kids and when they were. And so I see that too. I see in this Vader and Luke, like they're doing this spiritual soul dance in the midst of also being played and manipulated against each other by this other puppet master. Like it's a whole separate thing.
Well, I think there's a lesson there about inspiring people because like I feel like if you look at this scene as a battle for Vader's soul,
right?
You know, Luke isn't trying to control Vader.
Right.
Luke is just being Luke. You know, Luke is just throwing his saber down, saying, "I will not fight you," you know, taking the path of trying to be peaceful and like nonviolent. And he is, you know, trying to inspire the good in his father, like, and saying, like, I've seen it in you, like, I felt it in you. I know that there's still light in you, you know, and that you have the capacity to be better. But he's not trying to control him and not trying to lay down a narrative in the same way that the Emperor is. You know, it's like the Emperor is on the side of evil and he's the one who's trying to dictate and be authoritarian, you know. So it's all about like, what is the best way to influence somebody, right?
Yeah.
Like the best way to influence somebody and to change their mind is to already draw out what is inside of them. You cannot impose on other people, you know, any virtue that you want to inspire in them. You know, you have to draw it out from the inside, you know, rather than like slapping it on the outside like a coat of paint, you know.
Correct. Well, and 2 of the things that I wrote down for my, you know, what were my inspirational moments. I wrote the phrase, and I think when I wrote it down, I knew what I meant, but I had to circle back and like flesh it out a little bit more. But I wrote the phrase healing cuts. And what I meant by healing cuts was, and I'm not a gym person. I don't go to the gym and work out and lift weights and all that kind of thing. But I also understand the way the concept of lifting weights works is when you lift weights, you get those microscopic tears in your muscles, and that's why they hurt. And then it heals over and it creates more muscle. And it's this whole thing. And so through the series of these minutes, that was what I got. And I talked about it before in the literal part, the ups and downs, like these cuts, these things that cut deep, whether it was, Luke in the battles with, Vader, whether it was Han and Leia and, getting surrounded and then getting strengthened and finding themselves. This to me felt like those healing cuts that were growing over for a new muscle. So like with Luke and Vader, and it started at Empire, but it carries forward to where we are now. It's a new healing. And maybe that's a phrase that I just on the spot coined, like it's a new healing for Vader, but it also ties into, Luke says to Vader something to the effect of like, I want to save you. And he says, you already have, son.
Yeah.
And that line stands out to me more than it has in the past as well. Because like you said, Luke's not here to defeat the Emperor. Luke's here to save his father. Like he feels it in his core, his soul. His only mission is his dad. It's not it's as much as we don't want to believe it because he's the hero of the rebellion, which we get to revisit in Last Jedi. He's not there for the rebellion. He's there for his dad.
Yep.
And I think that is something that's very telling in the emotional journey that we get in the last few minutes of this Luke and Vader interaction.
Yeah.
And so for me, the inspirational moment that I took out of that is redemption doesn't always look like what we think it looks like. Because we've all failed. We've all messed up. We've all had places in our life where we have gone off the path. We haven't done what we were supposed to. Redemption is available, but it may not look like the thing you think it looks like.
I think that is a very timely message for this week.
It is absolutely a timely message for this week. But whether it's in a social media space, whether it's in a real life space, whether it's in a parenting space, whether it's in relationships with friends and family and whatever, like redemption doesn't fit a certain mold. It's not cut and paste. Like redemption comes in a variety of ways. And many times the redemption that we most need is not the thing that we expected it to be.
It's true. We're not always the best authority on where we need redemption. And
in fact, I'd say 99% of the time we don't get to decide what redemption looks like.
No,
and it's better that we
true.
don't, because what I think could be redemption is ultimately not what I needed. Or again, there's a bigger plan, whether it's the Force, whether it's your faith, whether it's whatever the thing is that guides your life. We try to put our stamp on it and we end up going, oh, I was way wrong. And it turns out I'm glad I was way wrong about it.
Perhaps it's better to think of it as a gift that is given rather than a prize that is earned.
Correct. And that's, you're Jewish, you live in Canada, but here's the deal. I live in the American South, in the heart of evangelical Christian culture and things. And you've said what, I've heard my whole life, but it's not wrong. It is something, it's a gift that's given. Grace, wherever it comes from, is a gift that's given. It's not something to be earned. And honestly, that reflects these scenes we're looking at with Vader.
Yeah.
Luke gave Darth Vader grace when he didn't deserve it. He gave it to him because it was a gift and he realized it's his father.
Yeah.
And I like what Andy says right here in the chat. It's the same thing. When you need love and understanding, the most is usually when you deserve it the least. That's what makes forgiveness so powerful and supernatural. And we've all had a bottom. We've all had that, base level of a low point in our life. And somebody like the Ewoks comes along and it's not who we expected it to be.
It's true.
But they offer the love and the grace and the forgiveness that what we didn't know we needed. And it comes in exactly the right moment.
It's true. Yes.
So I think that's very powerful.
And
what else do you have on these
well,
inspirational moments?
I wanted to talk about Han and Leia's
Mhm.
conversation before they get cock blocked by Wicket.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks a lot, Wicket.
Every time I watch it, I'm like, go away. Yeah. I just you feel for Han, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, and I mean, it's such a huge bit of character development for him
Mhm.
because, you know, I talked about this before when we talked about A New Hope. Like in A New Hope, like he doesn't believe in anything and
Right.
he's out for himself.
Mhm.
And he is number one, and that's what makes his appearance at the end of New Hope so such a an explosive cathartic moment, right?
Right.
You know, because this is him sort of reaching a bit beyond what you know, being self-interested
Mhm.
and what he's used to. And then by the end of Return of the Jedi, he is willing, like if Leia was not related to Luke and did want a relationship with Luke, you know, he's telling her like, I'm ready to walk away.
Yeah.
You know, even after like exchanging, you know, even after telling her that he loves her, and you know, after everything that they've been through, you know, he's putting her happiness ahead of his own, which is and it's probably one of the first times he's ever done that in his entire life.
Yep. And Matthew says it right here. Han learns to care for someone other than himself.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. I love those moments, and I do think that that's so powerful. And we said it earlier as well in this, like just the acting, like Harrison Ford in those moments, like he's dumbfounded when he realizes mid kiss with Leia, when he realizes, oh, he's your brother. Like,
yeah,
it just, and I don't know if thick is the word we want to use for Han in some of these moments.
Adorably thick.
Adorably thick. That's right. He's everybody's favorite big, dumb, cool brother. But like, it hit him in that moment that like, oh, this is what we're talking about. And I just loved it. And like I said, I didn't notice that as much in previous viewings of this as I did tonight. And I don't know what that says about me, other than, you know, I'm just a grown up who, you know, wants to see more love in the world and see people, you know, excited to receive that love as much as anything else.
Yeah, I'm a huge Han Leia shipper, so I felt like I was feasting.
Yeah, it's totally a feast. Well, let's do this. Let's jump into the third question and our last question for the canon study part of this. And then if you have anything else you want to add, we certainly will do that too. The third question is, where's the text sending us from here? And for me, this is always kind of the practical application. What are these minutes applying practically to you, to M's life in some way, shape, or form?
What a question. I mean, well, yeah. So, as I said, this movie is like my comfort movie. And I feel like it, like, it's just kind of like, it just, because I saw it when I was so young, it lives inside of me and it's so familiar. The happy ending is just, I saw it before I understood that there could be unhappy endings.
Right.
Yeah, I've actually been thinking about this a lot. I was thinking about this while I was buying milk with my child.
If Podcast of the Wills does anything, our goal is to make people think about this while they're buying milk with their children.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, I feel like when I think about this movie in my mundane life, I remember that happy endings are important.
Absolutely.
And Ghost Hayden is superior.
Now that that's the thing, and I forgot about that, to be perfectly honest, because again, as a fan of a certain age who grew up with the first version of this, I will say what's on Disney Plus are the special editions.
Listen, I just want to look at that man every chance I get. Okay, that's what this is about.
But well, and that's fair, and you know,
and
obviously
he has his good hair. He has his
it
the
is
Sith
the good hair.
So,
and we know that we're going to get some more of that with Kenobi coming up, probably not too far away from now. But we also have to pour one out for Sebastian Shaw, and
I know, no shade to Sebastian Shaw. Honestly, the Vader's death scene was,
yeah, it's great. But you're right, and I love the one thing I wrote down, and sometimes I have 2 or 3 or 4 things for any of these categories. But for me, on this practical application, it really is as simple as redemption comes and is available for any of us, no matter how low we think we've gone, no matter how far gone we think we are, no matter how much we think we've wronged a friend, a family, whoever it is. Like, it shows up with this. Again, Darth Vader's the worst person in the galaxy other than the Emperor who he works for. And his kid, who doesn't really know him as all, says, no, you're my dad and I'm here for you. And I'm willing to throw myself between the lightning wielding Emperor. And to me, that's the biggest message, which is, even if I'm not the one that needs that redemption, I also have the ability and the responsibility to potentially offer that redemption to someone else, which is even bigger than needing it, is realizing we have the ability to share and offer grace to somebody else.
I love that so much.
So that's, like I said, usually I have more than one point, but like, it all sums up in that for me. Like, it just, it is. Yeah, I love the Ewok stuff. I love, Han and Leia. I love the things we get. We could go on about the special editions and the other planets and, the celebration song and all of that. But for me, it does boil down to grace. Grace is offered, grace is available. And sometimes we're the ones that have to make the choice to offer it, which is the bigger, because Luke offered grace to Vader.
Yep.
Ultimately, he could have easily said, you know what, screw you. You've done all these terrible things. You were never there for me, whatever. But he stopped and went, he recognized him as a person. And maybe that's what I didn't think about before I wrote my notes down, which again comes back symmetrically to what we're seeing in, Book of Boba Fett. I love my favorite part of Book of Boba Fett, besides the most 2 recent episodes that really didn't feature Boba Fett, were the stuff with the Tuscans and the indigenous peoples and recognizing the personage of those people.
Yep.
Like, Luke recognized his father as a person, not as this big scary guy from around the galaxy. He recognized the person inside of him, and that's huge. And we have the ability to recognize the people we encounter as people, not as their persona, not as their reputation, not as their identity or gender, or like, people are people, and people were created special and loving, but they still deserve love. And we have the opportunity to offer that. Whether we choose to or not is a different story.
Well, and I would add that also, like, it sort of shows how love can send us on different trajectories, or how love can be a catalyst. It can inspire us to action, right? And about the rightness of seeking community. Like Brian always says that, like, one of the most important things that ever happens in a Star Wars movie is Leia giving the biscuit to Wicket.
Yep.
And forming that alliance with food.
Forming the bond. Yeah. Sometimes it's as simple as that too. We just need somebody to feed us. We need somebody. And again, we say, I live in the American South. Like, food is a part of our culture. Food is a part of who we are. And we make jokes all the time where you go to anybody who throws a party or a Christmas event or a birthday, whatever it is, 9 times out of 10, where does everybody end up? They end up in the kitchen around the island or the table or the counter, where like there's this whole other beautiful big space that was intended for socializing, but we come together around a table, which, you know, as a part of the Christian faith, like that's a big part of what we do. We end up around a table, whether it's, you know, symbolic or whether it's whatever, but like there's a simplistic beauty in that, and it certainly informs a part of my faith, which is we need to be nourished. We need to offer the opportunity to nourish one another, whether it's through friendship, whether it's through love, whether it's through actual physical food. And we get that with Leia and Wicket, like as at the core, and that changes the whole the trajectory of how that battle could have gone if they didn't have that moment and that one emissary to go, hey, she's one of us. It's cool. She fed me.
Well, yeah, because I mean, it was the presence, it was the ambush with the Ewoks that allowed them to take control over the base, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I love this from Framey. Wicket, Chewie, Grogu, all thinking with their stomachs.
You can identify with it.
I
many of us
I've
do.
been there. I've been there probably
Exactly.
earlier today. It's totally fair.
Exactly.
I love that. Do you have anything else that you want to add as far as the practical moments question? And then I do want to give you kind of a broad spectrum stage and platform for Return of the Jedi in general. I think you've referred to it before as the Sears catalog ending.
That was Brian, actually.
Oh, was that Brian?
About how they're all posed like they're in the Sears
That's right.
catalog.
They're very perfectly posed. But because this is the last episode of our canon study, and because I know it is such a special thing for you, I do want to kind of give you the final floor to, you know, tie it up in anything else that stands out for you.
I think we've covered it all. I mean, we've had this deep conversation about redemption. I quoted scripture. We talked about, we've talked about the importance of, mercy and love, connection. Like actually, you know what? I'm going to bring this up again.
Yeah.
When we were talking about on Pink Milk, when we were talking about the Emperor, we were talking about his search for immortality. And I was like, I find it very strange that he was seeking immortality, and for someone who is basically incapable of love, because, like we saw on The Good Place, like the best thing, about getting to live forever is that you get to have all the time you want with all the people you love, which is not true of this mundane life that we have here on Earth, right? It's like there's going to be people where you run out of time with them, even pets, like
Absolutely.
these beloved companions, and you just run out of happy moments to share with them. And so it's like, why do you want to live forever if that's not what you're gonna do?
Right. Yeah.
Because like that's the meaning of life. The meaning of life is to be in communion with other people and to give people love.
Absolutely.
And experience the joy of receiving love from someone who knows you intimately.
Absolutely. And it's it's community, and we all need and have a desire for community, even sometimes if we put up a false front that says, no, I'm good by myself, I don't need, like, we do need that. And in the world
that's built in. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and that's in a way that's built into the text with Return of the Jedi, because like on another sitcom on How I Met Your Mother, they've talked about how like Ewoks, the introduction of Ewoks was contentious because there was a segment of the fandom that felt that they were like, these like whatever, like pandering teddy bears, but I'm like, no, this is great. Like showing the importance of community by introducing a group that we have never seen before in a Star Wars movie and having them become integral to the story and integral to the victory, and then showing the celebration at the end, in like the Ewoks' home. Yesterday they were strangers, and today they're allies and friends.
Right.
Like, what better way to drive the point of the importance of community with, being in community with other people, and, achieving our victories through unity.
Without a doubt. And I think especially for the time that we have been in for the last 2 years, where we have all been in a place where we have had to be more. I mean, we were all tired of the word quarantine, but we've had to be cloistered away from one another because of a global pandemic and because of the way the world has shifted and changed with these things. I do think that it also, again, the brilliance of George Lucas, the brilliance of these stories, the brilliance of what it is at the core of story in general. And again, to come back to you as a writer, the brilliance of story in general is a story that is telling no matter what happens, no matter what is going on. Like, story is relevant because we all follow arcs. We all follow, the things that connect with us in our souls, in our hearts, in our beings, who we are. And so I really do think the power in this is being able to see a story, reflect in a story, and feel it where we are today in 2022, hearing these different things and hearing what's going on and connecting to it. It is powerful to me that we get to have a real world, one-to-one comparison to it, which is the need for community, even if we're cloistered from what our regular community is.
Yeah. I think we're all tired of it now.
Well, that's right. That's right. We'd like to go back to in-person real community. And, there's this little thing happening in May that we hope still happens in May that people could be communal with. But again, the world is ever changing, and we have to, use our powers and abilities to flow in the force to decide how we can react and deal with the changes.
Yeah. And get vaccinated. Everybody get vaccinated.
And get vaccinated. Absolutely. Wholly on board for that. Em, this has been a delightful and wonderful conversation. And I can't think of a better way to wrap up the last chapter of our Return of the Jedi Canon study than to have this conversation with you. Before we get out of here, where can people find you? Whether it's social media, whether it's the shows that you're on, give everybody the plugs, because we want everybody to get more M, because if you don't have more M in your life, what are you really doing with yourself?
Thank you so much. That's so sweet. So everyone can find me on Twitter at Hutsleia, HUTTSLEIA. Ship who you want. All ships are valid. I have there's a link to my card in my bio, so you can find various social accounts and my AO3. They're 18 plus only, please. And you can listen to me talk on Friday nights at 9:30 Eastern time on YouTube. Our channel is called Pink Milk Podcast. You can find us on Twitter at Serving Pink Milk. And I encourage you to check it out if you want to hear a queer perspective on Star Wars.
Absolutely. And I cannot encourage people enough to check out not only the Pink Milk Husband and Husband part of the Pink Milk channel and feed, but Steam Room on Friday nights. Like, it's one of my favorite things to do. And I've been kind of late the last couple of weeks because we've been doing streaming Star Wars while Book of Boba Fett has been going on. But there's nothing I love more on a Friday night than pouring a drink, jumping into the Steam Room, and listening to all of you have these conversations. And again, not only because it feels like family, and it has become a whole group of people, not only the four of you, but the people in the live chat that, I show up and everybody says hi. And it's just this welcome. It's like Cheers, but for Star Wars and a little more gay, which I'm totally here for. But to show up and have, again, that community, and that's what we just got done talking about, to have these spaces that even over the course of these last few years where we've all been isolated, to have these points where we see one another and we get to share a drink, a story, a laugh over something that we love. And that's what Star Wars is about. It's about community. It's about love. And it's about being there for everybody's favorite Star Wars cliche, found family. Like, we're here to find these new families. And I feel like at this point it should be one of my tattoos, which is just Star Wars is found family. But I'm so thankful for it. And I'm so thankful for you and Brian and Mark and Chase and what you're putting out into this community that we all love, and it's needed and it's important. So thank you. And most importantly, thank you for hanging out tonight. Thank you for being a part of the show. Thank you to everybody that watched along as patrons in our live chat tonight. Also, thank you to all our listeners. Thank you for being a part of Podcast of the Wills. There's so much more to Podcast of the Wills. We are a part of the ATG Cast feed. That's Around the Galaxy. That's Disturbances in the Force. And also, anytime there's a new Star Wars something on Disney Plus, right now it's Book of Boba Fett. It's going to wrap up this next week. I can't wait to see what we're going to get. But we also know we have like 2 or 3 or 4 more other things. So plenty of things. Follow ATG Cast on Twitter. Follow Will's Pod on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, which I don't use, but I probably should, but I'm old, so I don't. Come find us, leave us a review, listen, be a part of the family, and most importantly, thank you for being a part of what we do, and may the Force be with you always.